Hello, friends. Welcome to the Case for Life program. So happy you're with us today. What I want to talk about today is what is going on in the strategies of both the pro-life position and the pro-abortion one. And we'll be joined in a little bit by Dr. Marc Newman to talk about his new book, Pivot, that gets released today. And I want to encourage you to get this book because he lays out a strategy for the pro-life movement in a post-Roe v. Wade world. Very important book. For those of you that may not be familiar with Dr. Marc Newman, he is the author of the book Contenders. He's been a pro-life speaker and trainer for at least 4 decades, if not longer. And he's a guy that speaks regularly at pregnancy center banquets and training seminars for clergy. I look to him as one of my most consistent friends and colleagues in this fight. Marc, so good to have you with us.
It's great to be here.
And before we go any further, tell folks a little bit about your background, just so they know. In other words, go ahead and pridefully brag on yourself.
I'm going to have a 2 Corinthians moment here. Well, I started out my career ages ago, as you mentioned. I was at the University of California at Irvine. I was the director of speech and debate there. And then I finished out my career recently. It goes by so fast, doesn't it? Nearly 10 years ago, I was teaching in the doctoral program at Regent University in Virginia Beach. And my background is I teach speech and debate at the lower division level, taught rhetorical theory and criticism. In other words, I study argument on the graduate level. And I got sucked into the pro-life movement really early on in my career. I had an associate pastor at my church, Arthur Ellison, who took a 1-year leave of absence to be the executive director of this weird thing called a crisis pregnancy center. So at the time, I was doing some corporate training while I was at UC Irvine. And he said, I know you do that. Would you come down and train my people? I said, sure. What do you do? And so he started explaining it to me. Now keep in mind, I'm well educated. I had been going to a Christian church for well over a decade. I knew nothing about abortion, nothing at all. And it's in the second half of the 80s here, probably 86,
Wow.
87, and didn't know anything. And so I said, well, send me some stuff and I'll put something together for you. I'll just use the corporate stuff and we'll retrofit it. And so he sent it to me and my jaw just hit the floor. I couldn't believe it. So I went in and I trained them and I thought, well, one and done. I'll get back to working in glass offices in Irvine. And God had other ideas. And the next thing I knew, I was training a variety of people at the pregnancy center movement level, and then ended up over at National Right to Life and speaking there. And now I'm training a bunch of folks who are statewide representatives for National Right to Life. And just things grew out of there. And as a matter of fact, you actually came to one of the first ones of those to demonstrate how old, not just I am, but how old you are.
Well, thank you,
I remember
sir.
Greg Cunningham had sent you down. Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah, La Quinta
to come to one of the pro-life speaker seminars.
Yep.
Yeah, ages
La
ago.
Quinta
Ages ago.
Yeah, but that seminar taught me how to structure my comments and how to release my material in a way that would be engaging to my audience. And I'm still benefiting from that training I received from you. Well, you've got a new book out. And
I do.
It came out actually today. It's now on Amazon. People can get it. And now you're holding one up. There it is.
Yes,
it's called
finally
Pivot. Now, let me ask you something. There's a television show where there's a scene where guys are moving a couch up the stairs, and that one guy is always yelling pivot. Was that Seinfeld? I can't remember. But why that title? Tell me why that title.
For years, under Roe versus Wade, you know this as well as I do, and most of your listeners know this as well. We had a singular focus. There was Roe versus Wade, and it was the elephant in the room. It kept states from passing any meaningful legislation to protect the lives of unborn children. So then all of a sudden, then Dobbs comes along, overturns Roe, and it shatters our strategy, right? We no longer are dealing with one monolithic issue. Now we're dealing with 50 separate issues in 50 separate states.
Yeah.
So to continue trying to strategize in the way we've done in the past would be fruitless. And so we needed to pivot. So in this book, what I basically do is lay out kind of where we are right now, right? The things that have happened since the Dobbs decision came down, how the abortion industry literally had a meltdown for a little while. And then they sort of regrouped and retrenched, and now they are moving forward. There are more abortions now than there were before Dobbs, and there are some strategic reasons for that, which we can get into. And so we set up, this is where we are. And then we talk about 5 strategic pivots we need to engage in involving language, how we speak about this issue, about education, about how we legislate in pro-life states because we're not remotely done yet, and how we legislate in and work with pro-abortion states. And then finally, the fact of the matter is far too many Christian people who would be ideologically pro-life really aren't doing anything. And so we need to pivot from inaction. And I think the reason people were inactive was because they didn't think they really could effectively do anything because of Roe.
Right.
Well, Roe's gone, and now everybody can effectively do something. And so we want to move people from inaction to action. And that's the final pivot in the book. We've got examples of all kinds of things that anybody can do.
Now, one thing I think we need to clarify here for our viewers, a lot of people assume wrongly that the overturning of Roe and Casey somehow gave unborn children protection. It did not. It did
No.
something else. Could you explain to our viewers what it did?
Yeah, what it did was it removed all of the barriers that existed at the state level. So the best way to think about it is somebody pressed a reset button in 1973, and it allows states now to enact their own protections. In fact, I believe it was Kavanaugh who explicitly said this isn't going to make abortion illegal nationally, right? And they said, well, no, it's just going to return it to the states, and that's what it did. So the interesting fact is the only reason, if you live in a state that has legal abortion, the only reason you have legal abortion is because the people in your state want it. And that gives us a tremendous opportunity, right? We can help people to see that they ought not want it.
If we're smart. But,
Yes,
what I want to come back to here is we are losing in deep red states like Montana, Ohio, Kentucky, Missouri, and the list goes on and on. We really lost in Florida, and the only reason abortion didn't get written into the state constitution there was because of a 60% threshold. But
correct.
talk a little bit about where the culture is, where even in deep red states, we're seeing abortion get written into the state constitution as a fundamental right. How is that even possible?
Well, it's because, as you know, right, the abortion issue is never talked about honestly by our opponents. So they use all kinds of linguistic tricks. They start talking about abortion being fundamentally healthcare, right? You'll hear people talk about abortion being normal. You'll hear, and they're strategically smart. They had, in a number of states, they combined the initiative on abortion with some other left-leaning initiative to drive those people to the polls. In one of the states, I believe that it connected with legalized marijuana. And so
Yeah.
obviously, the people out there wanting to smoke weed, legally are probably going to be the people who are going to pull the lever on abortion. So our opponents are very, very smart. Then they used incredible amounts of fear campaigning. So they started running around telling people, if we don't have this law here in this state, a woman is going to die from having an ectopic pregnancy because a physician won't be allowed to treat her, or she might miscarry and the physician won't be allowed to deliver her dead child and she will die from having a septic uterus. They just really fear-mongered hard. I always tell everybody who asks me about that, I said, tell you what, Dobbs has been the law of the land now for, two years. And I want you to tell me, actually longer than that, and I want you to tell me how many physicians have been successfully prosecuted for treating a woman with an ectopic pregnancy in any of the states where abortion is illegal. And of course, what you'll hear is crickets because nobody's ever been
Right.
prosecuted for that.
Or show me the statute that actually says women can't get medical care if they need it. It's not there. But this does raise an
No,
important part that I think your book is going to be strategic in addressing. We may not like that it's the truth, but the reality is these scare tactics not only work with the public, they work with marginal pro-life voting blocs as well. And so you'll get
yeah,
pro-life Christians who are like, well, I oppose abortion, but I don't want women being harmed. And that means we as pro-lifers have to think about how we're being prudent in advancing our own legislative strategies.
absolutely. It's all got to start, I think, educationally in the church. I always tell folks, that there is no state, there is no city, there is no nation that's holier than its churches. And so,
Yep.
if we can't get into the church and help people to understand what is the truth about the nature of unborn children and what abortion does to unborn children, we're lost. Because there are a lot
Yeah.
of people who are they are sentimentally pro-life, but they are not grounded philosophically or even biblically in the life issue. And so that's gonna have to it has to happen in the church because it's not going to happen any other place first. Now, see, I do think that if it happens in the church first, it can spill over into the wider community, but it's got to start at the church.
Yes. Now, one of the things I know you and I have talked about before, an important distinction here. Prior to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the primary message the pro-life movement was giving clergy went something like this. Well, your silence is killing children. You've got blood on your hands because you're not addressing this issue. And you and I both know, and I know this as a former associate pastor. By the way, I'm still licensed. I can marry and bury if needed. But the reality is that these pastors have a to-do list that is 8 billion miles long. They are expected to wear 100 different hats, all of which impose on them crushing job descriptions. We need to pivot in how we approach clergy in our local churches. Talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. The current clergy in the West is the most messaged at group of clergy in all of human history. Every single Facebook reel, every TikTok channel, every YouTube channel has got some subject matter expert out there telling his congregants that the pastor's got it all wrong. And then the pastor is expected by his congregation to be the subject matter expert on virtually everything. So when I talk to pastors, I tell them, look, I get it. Right? You're supposed to knock it out of the park every Sunday. You're supposed to be an ideal communicator. You have to be a deep moral philosopher. You've got to be able to look at the moral implications, all across social media, all across mass media, films, music, television. And you got to, determine what all those worldviews are and then provide appropriate responses. And then you've got to be a really, really good a counselor, in the office. And and by the way, you also need to be a biologist, a geologist, and an astrophysicist. And the list goes on. And now here comes Scott Klusendorf and Marc Newman saying, and by the way, I got one other thing for you. And a lot of pastors, I think, they're just fatigued. They cannot
they are
see.
Fatigued. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And also they've been told virtually all of them are men, unless you're, with the Church of England. Sorry.
Yeah.
You can edit that out later.
No, we won't.
They're virtually all men. And so they've been told by the culture for the last 50 years, stay in your lane. If you don't have a uterus, you don't get an opinion, right? So you're not supposed to talk about this. It's a woman's issue, they say. And so when you combine all of that with the fact that these guys, maybe they went to a Christian high school where they never talked about abortion. Then they went on to a Christian college where they never talked about abortion. And then some of them went on to seminary where, surprise, they never talked about abortion, bioethics, any of that kind of stuff. And now suddenly they find themselves in a church, maybe in a conservative area, and people are coming up to them saying, hey, how come you don't preach about abortion? Well, they don't want to look like idiots.
By the way, Marc, the problem is even worse today than it was when we got started. You and I are class exhibits here. We weren't hearing about abortion. And this was at a time when the pro-life movement had much stronger tailwinds. We had an undoubtedly pro-life president in Ronald Reagan. We had pro-life advocates in both political parties. We had pro-life Democrats at the time like Jesse Jackson, Dick Gephardt, Al Gore. Even Joe Biden signed and co-sponsored a human life amendment. So we had representatives in both political parties. The Catholic bishops were speaking out on this issue quite strong. And we had the moral majority organizing people in churches. None of those things are happening right now, really.
No.
And so is it any wonder that we've got clergy that aren't hearing what they need to hear on this topic? And if we just give them another to-do list item, that's a big problem. Hey, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, let me cue the next question up for you. I'm going to go ahead and go there, but there's a part in your book where you talk about why these equal protection bills that are being floated are really problematic, and you give an answer that primarily goes like this: they're unenforceable. And I want to hear your thinking on that, because most people aren't saying that, they're saying other things. So I want to hear your unique perspective on that. We're going to pick that up right after the break. We'll be right back, folks. Hello, friends. You may not have time to read a full-length treatment of abortion like I've done in this book, The Case for Life, the second edition, but you may have time to take what amounts to 7 sessions a week's worth of study if you want to do it day by day to learn how to defend your pro-life views persuasively. We have a basic course that will help you do just that. You will learn how to make a formal case for the pro-life position. You will learn how to defend it with science and philosophy. Even with non-Christians, you can make a case for the pro-life view. Then we'll teach you how to handle objections, how to recognize the 5 bad ways people argue about abortion, and how they often bring up things that are beside the point. You'll learn to keep the main thing, so that you're in charge instead of feeling like you're in the hot seat whenever the issue of abortion comes up. Visit the website for details. Welcome back, friends. Great to have you with us. We have Dr. Marc Newman with us, and he's got a new book out called Pivot that I want you to get. It's there at Amazon. It's probably at other book selling sources too, but you want to get this if you care about pro-lifers working smarter in a post-Roe v. Wade world. So Marc, I kind of teased you with a question before the break, and that is, you've got a section in your book, you went there, so I'm going to call it out and say, where you said these equal protection bills, like the one that recently was defeated in Tennessee, there's one coming up in South Dakota, and we're seeing equal protection candidates be defeated in recent primary elections in pretty large numbers, but that's not the only problem with this movement. What is it that concerns you about these so-called equal protection bills that will prosecute women for murder if they have an abortion?
Well, as you and a number of other people have already very ably pointed out, it's just never going to happen. But even if it could happen, the question is, would it be good? I find it really interesting when they use the term equal protection. And what I want to respond to is, well, who are you protecting? Right? I'm going to argue that the job of the pro-life movement is to protect as many children from the evil of abortion as is humanly possible. Right? We want to rescue as many children as possible from abortion. So the question is, these guys are saying, well, if we pass these laws, then we'll protect all of the children. And I'm going to say, not only will you not protect all of the children, you will put children who are currently able to be saved at tremendous risk. And there are a number of reasons for that. Number one, for starters, it's impossible to get rid of the drugs. Right? Mifepristone and misoprostol both have other uses beyond abortion. And so you're not going to be able to get rid of those drugs. They're going to be around for a really long time. Secondly, you're never going to have the evidence to prosecute anybody because the drugs metabolize so rapidly inside a woman's body. Within hours of taking the drugs, the drugs are virtually undetectable. There have been a couple of studies, and I mean, I've ran across just a couple of them where they've been able to find the drugs either in a woman's body or in the body of the fetus. But in order to do it, you would need unbelievably expensive equipment that costs a ton of money to calibrate. That require very, very skilled technicians to be able to run. And so it's virtually impossible. So much so that the people who engage in what I call e-tail abortion, right? So I don't like the term telehealth because there's nothing healthy about it. What these people do is they'll tell them, look, if you have an incomplete abortion after taking the abortion pill, just go to an emergency room and tell them, I think I'm pregnant, but now I'm bleeding, or I think I'm having a miscarriage. And no one's going to be able to find out that you took these drugs. So it's just not possible to find the drugs because they disappear out of a woman's system. And then you have states like California passed AB 240, where they have now taken all of the identifying features off the label of the drugs when they mail them. So the doctor's not identified, the pharmacy's not identified, and the patient is not identified on the bottle.
Oh, man.
You're going to have a very hard time getting any evidence for these folks. And then the problem then becomes we now lose, in many regards, we lose our ability to target the abortion industry. But here's the one that I think is the scariest, because I know we have limited time here. Right now, at many pregnancy centers, we have the ability, right, the beautiful, if you can call it that, aspect of the abortion pill over surgical abortion is once surgical abortions start, it's virtually impossible to stop them, right? That baby's gone. In the abortion pill protocol, there's a gap between taking mifepristone and misoprostol. Now, it used to be 24 to 48 hours, and now, they've been doing research trying to get it down to 6 to 8 hours, and there's a strategic reason for that. They don't want pregnancy centers to intervene. But pregnancy centers can intervene during that gap, and the research shows that 65 to 68% of women who get the abortion pill protocol, a reversal protocol, which is just they flood her system with progesterone, In 65 to 68% of the cases, they can save the life of that unborn child. Okay, now let's roll this back. We have equal protection laws. A woman takes mifepristone. Now, mifepristone by itself, if you don't take anything else, will cause an abortion in over 75% of cases. Everybody who works at a pregnancy center is a mandated reporter, just like a
Right.
school counselor would be. So if a woman has taken mifepristone, she is intentionally determined that she's going to harm her child. Now she regrets it. She feels bad about it, and she wants the progesterone. But if she comes in and tells them, I've taken mifepristone, now they would be mandated reporters and they would have to turn her in. Now, it
Yeah.
might save her baby, and then she's going to go off to jail. Now, if that is the case, what do you suppose are the odds that that woman will ever present herself at a pregnancy center for abortion pill reversal if she knows that when she does so, she's probably going to be prosecuted and go to jail? So
Minus
these are
5
all,
billion are the odds. Yeah.
yes. So these are children who can be saved. They can be saved. But these equal protection laws will make it not possible. So, number one, not enforceable. You're not going to be able to find anybody. You're not going to be able to prosecute anybody. It's, by the way, and it's logistically a nightmare. What are you going to do? Start the miscarriage police? Do you have any
Yeah.
idea how many women naturally miscarry every year? And can you imagine the trauma of coming in and being investigated? You wanted a baby and now you miscarry. And now, on top of that, people are going to come in and do this. So it's logistically impossible. You're never going to be able to staff it. You're never going to be able to find the women. You're never going to be able to successfully prosecute the women. And then beyond that, you're going to stop APR. And then the worst part about this is the equal protection folks, they are creating a boogeyman that I wouldn't be surprised at all if Democratic groups are shoveling money at these folks because they want to prop them up, right? Just like they had an article in the New York Times, right? Making them look like the boogeyman. And so we've got a number of states that are already all in on abortion. We've got a number of states that are all in for life. And then we've got a lot of mushy middle states that haven't made a decision yet. Can you imagine the ads that are going to come out with the beautiful young woman? And I've already seen ads like this, who's being currently prosecuted now because she was just trying to get fundamental health care, which is her right, right? That's how they're going to pitch it.
Yep.
Well, the minute the other side gets 38 states, they are going to push to pass a constitutional amendment that is going to enshrine Roe. And then every single protection we have been working for over 50 years to put in place will be immediately wiped away.
And by the way, an equal protection bill is dead on arrival in a state that has written abortion rights into its state constitution. And, when I talk to these people, they say to me, hey, we should be able to do this in red states if pro-lifers would just join with us. Well, pro-lifers and abolitionists couldn't join together to stop these bills from being written into these red states like Ohio, Missouri,
Nope.
and other places. And so it's just pure fantasy. They think our strength is vastly greater than it is. But I'm bothered by something else, Mark, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this. I think these people are engaging in a sleight of hand, and here's how. They're promising abolition, but what they're really delivering is criminalization. Now, count me among those who wants to see a day when abortion is treated exactly the way any other homicide would be, any other unjust taking of human life. I get that. But there is a prudential issue about what we lead with. But what I'm getting at is what I see the equal protection people doing, and I'm glad you're talking about this in Pivot. What they're doing is they're totally ignoring the middle section of the application of law. You can have a statute on the book that does nothing, that no juries will convict, no DA will enforce, no judge will, even allow to come before his court. Your law dies standing up in that kind of environment. And that's what we saw in Australia, for example. They had a perfect ban on abortion, one that every abolitionist would love. And
Mhm.
yet the thing was never enforced. And then a future legislative time arrived and it got thrown aside as being useless and not applicable. And that's the danger. So I like the idea of distinguishing permanent abolition from premature abolition.
Well, here's the thing. So you're correct. There are a lot of jurisdictions that won't enforce the law. We've already seen that in many instances
Right.
here in the United States on all kinds of other laws. But what I explain to people is I say, look, have I know you own a Mustang, so I know the answer to this question. Scott Klusendorf, have you ever broken a speed law in that car?
The
ever.
right question would be, have I ever not?
Okay, well, I ask this to people all the time. Have you ever sped? Everybody says, sure, yeah, absolutely, I have. Well, would you speed if you knew every morning when you pulled your car out of the garage, a state trooper was going to pull up behind you and then follow you around all day long till you park the car in the evening? Well, the answer is obviously no. Well, why not? Well, because I'm going to get caught. That's correct. So what happens when people get behind the wheel of a car? They make a cost benefit analysis. They need to go somewhere. They recognize the odds of being caught are very slim, and as a result, they go ahead and speed. Now, every once in a while, they get caught and they feel, okay, I'll go ahead and pay the fine, and away I'll go. The fact of the matter is that when you make laws that are unenforceable, you breed lawlessness. And so it's
Yep.
not just that it won't be enforced at certain jurisdictional levels. I mean, you can pass laws all you want in Texas, right? And then you'd have guys in Austin letting people go left and right, or never prosecuting to begin with. But beyond that, you've got the people supplying the abortion drugs telling their clients, you're not going to get caught because it can't be detected. So just don't
Right.
worry about it. Tell people you're having a natural miscarriage. They can't tell the difference. So yeah, you can't pass unenforceable laws, and it also takes our eye off the ball. We should be
Yeah.
going
And
after abortionists, and we should be stopping the interstate shipment of abortion pills. If we could lock down our pro-life states so that they could literally enforce their own law. If the Supreme Court, they're bound to be getting this case shortly, would be able to lock them down and say, look, you can't have a heckler's veto over a state's pro-life laws. And
yeah.
once that happens and we solidify life states and death states, I think people are going to be able to see very clearly what kind of culture is bred in a state that emphasizes death for its young and a state which protects the lives of people from the moment of conception until natural death.
Marc, we've got about a little over a minute. Where can people find Pivot in addition to Amazon?
Right now, it's at Amazon. We're working through some issues with Ingram Spark. Right now, they messed up on the cover, so
Oh,
until we can get those things fixed, it's going to be on Amazon exclusively right now.
and is there any plan for you to go out and teach the Pivot material in seminar fashion?
We've got the Contend for Life events that are happening in various places throughout the United States. Go to contendforlife.com and you can see where we're going to be. There, we teach pastors how to make the case for life from the pulpit. We train them how to do what the seminary should have taught them how to do. And the great news is it doesn't take forever. We do it in about 90 minutes. And then in the evening, we teach a pro-life apologetics class to area-wide to everybody who wants to come, how to make the scientific, moral, and biblical case for life, why abortion ideology puts all human beings at risk, and what they can do about it.
Well, I'm going to tell you folks that are watching this book gets my strongest endorsement. After you buy my book, you should buy this one. Actually, start with Marc's because it's at the strategic level. I am so glad you wrote this book. I can't think of a more timely moment to introduce it to the culture. Thank you for writing it, and I hope this book has the influence you want it to have and helps us think clearly about the right strategy moving forward to save the most lives possible, because that's ultimately our goal. Marc, thanks for joining us.
God bless you, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for today. Look forward to seeing you next time. We're going to have Marc on again very soon to talk about how Pivot applies to pregnancy resource ministry. We'll be talking about that with him in a subsequent show. But for today, that's it. Look forward to seeing you all next time.